We lost more men and women in the city of Ramadi itself than any other place out of the almost 6,000 we've lost in this long war. Almost 25%. That's how bad it was, and that's how bad it had become. Ramadi, and the battle for Ramadi, was a key point in military history. It's part of the reason I shared this story, is because I never wanted the Battle of Ramadi to fall into the shadows of other significant battles like Fallujah, or Baghdad, or Nowzad, or Kandahar. Any of those. All have equal value, and they all have a story. But as the city continued to boil over in this 2-year battle, it's often defined as 2 battles for whatever reason. The first Battle of Ramadi in 2004 and then 2006. And I'm quite sure the moderator, Phil Sprinson, would argue with me that because he was stuck there in 2005. So I like to define that battle as a 2-year battle. So how do you fight in one city for 2 years that's just spilling into the burners? How do you clean up that mess? Well, we never quite figured it out in that city. 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines fought there in 2004, and they fought hard, and they lost a lot of Marines. And then we transitioned. We had other Marine units going back in, but each time there was this give and play with the governance, with the security, with the military, and they were never quite ready to really accept responsibility for that city, which was the capital of Al-Anbar province. This was key terrain. This is where the insurgents had decided to fight. And in 2006, when President George W. Bush ordered the surge strategy, along with General David Petraeus, Ramadi is where they were focused. Because up until that point, we'd been playing this giant game of whack-a-mole across all of Al-Anbar province, in the whole region, constantly hammering down the insurgents in every single city, pounding them into fine dust in many cases, or pink mist. But in 2006, when the surge came and we flooded the battle space with tens of thousands of forces, we were part of that with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, along with Fox Company, was sent to Ramadi. And we fought underneath the 1st Brigade Combat Team, the Ready First. And under them, we were kind of farmed around, a bit of scab labor, so to speak, to cover down on all of those heavy pockets of resistance that kept popping up in the city of Ramadi itself. So during that time, the Army used us as what one of my commanders calls me, a blunt weapon of war, because we wielded such tremendous combat power. I had over 250 Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen, all at my disposal. And I was very unabashed to take anyone with a rifle under my command. They were a combat cameraman, or a medic, or an interpreter, or a civil engineer, or a biometric scanner, or a special forces retiree who was doing biometric scanning. They were welcome, as long as they were qualified and could carry a rifle, and I sent them all to my first sergeant. And we expanded and we grew. So that type of thinking may have seemed a little unconventional at the time, but it really added leverage that we needed for my commanders to utilize our company to be as effective as we were at doing what Marines do best, attacking and killing the enemy. And that's what our mission was. There's no way to sugarcoat that. Our mission was to kill or capture anti-Iraqi forces. And that's what the Marines did, day in and day out. Sometimes fighting 5, 6, 7 times a day in direct contact with enemy forces, up close, street to street, house to house, room to room, door to door, every corner they turned. They never knew what was around it. They fought on the front lines of a battle where it was everywhere, against a faceless, ununiformed enemy. And this enemy lived amongst the people, these Iraqi people that are often called collateral damage in a war, but they're not. They're people. 90% of the city, of almost 300,000 people, they wanted peace. They wanted security. They were people. They had sons and daughters, and they wanted to go to college. They wanted to get their driver's license. And that's what the Marines were also there to do, was to protect them. Because Marines do a lot of things great, and I'm a little bit biased. They absolutely attack and kill the enemy with unbridled ferocity and shoot the rifle straighter than anyone else. But they do it with honor. And I always found that through my mentors, those that taught me, the real valuable qualities and the real way to be an effective leader was to be able to read in between those lines. And I think I figured that out along the way. Being able to look at those leadership traits and seeing those qualities that weren't in print, like love, compassion, caring, understanding. Those aren't written on any charts, and those aren't taught in any of the schools we as professional warriors attend. Because sometimes we think that makes us soft or it makes us weak. I'd argue it makes us stronger. I'd argue that those things, being able to read in between the lines like that, knowing when it's all right to be hard on my Marines, and knowing when they needed me to put their arm around them, to pick them back up, to be their leader, I think that was really the best thing that was ever taught to me. And I can teach a lot of things, as many can. I could always teach a Marine how to shoot his rifle straighter. I could always teach him to run fast, most times faster than me. I could always teach him how to employ a weapon system, but I could never teach him to care. That's something that can't be taught. You can't teach someone to care. And if you don't care about what you're doing, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, if you're not giving 100% of yourself to everything you do, whether it's being a Marine, or being an insurance salesman, or being a writer, if you don't care, it's all worthless. Because those that care, those that truly put the needs of others before themselves, that's what really defines leadership. And those are the things that have sustained me throughout my career as a Marine, as my time in the corporate world, through my relationships, through this new journey I've been blessed to experience as a writer. If there was ever a job qualifier or a resume builder that people should be proud to put on their application, it should be, I have this level of post-traumatic stress. Guys that are in the military, cops who deal with gunshot wounds, firefighters who pull children out of burning buildings, and adults with the skin peeling off of them. If that's not a job qualifier for what you do, I don't know any other vocation that's suffering from the effects of post-traumatic stress can be identified. And then in the other categories, how did you learn from it? How did you grow from that trauma? How are you today? So when our military members come back and we have to address those issues of post-traumatic stress, a lot of them will ignore it because it makes you weak. It makes you less of a Marine. And they shelf it, and they don't want to deal with it because of that stigma. And I think we've moved forward a little bit, but we still have a long way to go about addressing this type of behavior. We've embraced so much change in the Marine Corps over the last 20 years. It's impossible for me to think that we cannot frame this problem. There's a time for talking, and there's a time for doing. I don't spend my whole life up on a stage talking. The other 90% of it I spend writing, I spend reaching out, I spend connecting, I spend picking up the phone and doing. Because that's the most important thing that people can do to help veterans, is to give of your time. Give of your money to organizations that help our families and veterans with post-traumatic stress. And at the end of it, if you can't do any of those things, listen. That's something that took me a long time to figure out, to be a good listener, which is ironic, coming from a guy that spends the majority of his life as a public speaker. But it's important because their stories matter. And often, if you stop and listen to what they have to say, they'll tell you what the problem is, and you'll find a way to help. Well, I think we've been largely successful of eliciting that type of behavior from our leadership. It sure isn't from our doctrine, because we've got the best doctrine the 1980s had to offer. But despite that lack of textbook on how to lead and how to train, the Marine Corps and our military is the best trained, best equipped, best fighting force on the planet. And we do that because despite having the best doctrine the 1980s offer, we've adapted. We've created substitutions for those gaps. We've implemented training programs from the Army to the Marine Corps to the Air Force. And although we may have some systematic failures, some programmatics that need addressing, at the individual level, still to this day, because I hike up to Camp San Mateo and see the 5th Marines up there almost monthly. They've got some of the best gear and equipment that I've ever seen in my life. And it continues to grow. And that's what really helps these guys. And to do the things they do at such a young age is remarkable.